to the March 5th, 2025 meeting of the Police Accountability Board. Public notice: to access the meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using the URL in the public agenda packet. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 891-7458-9069. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Land acknowledgement: the city of Berkeley recognizes the community we live in was built on the territory of Capuchin, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Brona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Brona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shaman, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. That leads us to agenda item number 1, roll call.
Thank you, Chair. I'll now proceed with roll call. Chair Cayetano.
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson informed us that she's running late. Board Member Calavita. Here. Board Member Lethbridge.
Here.
Board Member Williams.
Here.
Okay, we have 4 of them. I'd like to note that on behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Aguilar, Investigator Rector, Data Analyst Mendia, myself, Policy Analyst Murillo. On behalf of the BPD tonight, we have Deputy Chief Tate joining us remotely, and Lieutenant Bonaventure joining us here in person. On behalf of the City Attorney's Office, DCA Hylas is joining us tonight remotely. And from the City Manager's Office, we have our DEI Officer, Rex Brown. Chair, with that, roll call. We have 4 of them. We can continue.
Okay. Agenda item number 2. I have a small change to the agenda. I would recommend, but does anyone else have any? Okay, my change is I'd like to see the table. If I can turn to it. Item 9B until the next meeting, when we have a fuller board. The restructuring of the PAB subcommittees. Okay.
I second the motion.
Okay, I'm gonna make the motion.
I second.
Okay. We need a vote on that.
Are there any objections to the tabling of item 90? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Okay.
Okay, and with that change, I would ask that we approve the amendment.
Second.
Well, you make a motion.
I move we approve the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing and hearing no objections, the agenda is approved. With item 90 tabled to this meeting.
Okay. Let's go to 3, public comment.
Okay.
Sorry. Number 3, public comment.
Thank you, Chair. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time. If there are many speakers, they may comment on any matters within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. I will start with those that are physically present before moving on to our virtual attendees. With that said, would anybody that is physically present like to provide public comment? Okay. Seeing none, I'll now move on to our virtual attendees. At this time, if you're attending via Zoom and would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand icon or *9. Okay, Chair, at this time, we do not have any hands raised.
Okay, great. Let's go to agenda 4, approval of minutes. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes?
No, I looked at the minutes be approved. I second.
And So for the approval of the minutes, we have a motion by board member Leffler and a second by board member Calvillo. Are there any objections to the approval of the minutes? Okay, seeing or hearing none, the minutes for the February 19th meeting are approved.
Okay. Item 5, on the staff report. Director?
Yes, good evening, Chair, board members, members of the public, and our fellow staff and colleagues. Thank you for joining us tonight. Just want to recognize we're in the March history, the Women March, which means March Women's History Month. So just want to recognize and uplift women in our board, in our office, and thank you for the work that you do. Also for the chief and the deputy chief and their leadership. Appreciate the embracement of diversity that we have here in the city and our mayor. So thank you for that. We just want to start with the report out, which we provided in the packet of our mission session. We had a very nice intimate session here in this location. Got some members of the public attended both in person and remotely. The chair popped in for some remarks. We appreciate that. We were competing with another high profile event. There was a community discussion regarding the concerns regarding Catman and their proximity to the high school. So that was going at the same time of our event. But we believe under the leadership and of our DEI officer and our consultant, that we had a robust conversation. It definitely helped us as an office with our programming, our proposed programming, how to restructure it. We got some good feedback about what the community members want to see, where they want to see us. They want to see us in different areas of the community. Some want us to have events again in South Berkeley. So we're going to incorporate all that feedback into our programming for the year, and then just provide the board an update on that. Also wanted to just quick update. We're still in line with our annual report. We're working behind the scenes with the vice chair. Gave an update that we have structured the data. We're in the process of some analysis, look at some of the trends of our complaint data, of the crime data, and also this year we're featuring an analysis of the training data that the department provides to us. So we'll provide an update to the vice chair, working to get that to the board as soon as we can. We also do have to factor in for the city attorney's review, so we'll include that as part of our process. We had the opportunity today to advance our relationship with YouthWorks. That's the city's internship program for for high school students and young adults. We've had discussions for a while with them. We're finally at a place where we can formalize that. We had a student for a meeting that came to us, so we're excited about him being an intern with us. They're high school interns, so they're limited to how much time they can spend throughout the week, but we can assign a project that makes sense. And he's very excited about joining us. So we'll keep you updated on that. And simultaneously, we're doing selection process for our summer interns with the university. Last year, we had an intern with the Public Service Center at the university. They allowed us to be a site again, so we're working to get some students for the summer. We submitted the second edition of the newsletter to the council. It's included in the packet for your review. We have gotten some feedback on it, and we do appreciate folks that are tuning into that, giving them bite-sized information on what we're working on. We have submitted the vehicle pursuit letter and the memo to the city manager, who has confirmed they received it. So that is going through its process. He'll review, says he's expecting the chief's responses, and will review accordingly and get back to the body. A gentle reminder about conferences, particularly NACO, October 26th and 30th in Minneapolis. And we also want to now that we have our scenario-based training system, we did a systems test today, so we're gonna be rolling out that program. And that is something that the interns will potentially help us, move forward and along. Before I turn it over to our fellow, city manager's office representatives, let me just turn it over to, Jason Wecker, our investigator, to see if he has any other legal updates.
Just like I attended the NACO midwinter board meeting this past weekend in Minneapolis, where the conference will be held. It was a very productive meeting, and on Sunday, several of us visited the George Floyd Memorial in Minneapolis, which is a very moving experience. And we're hoping that those people who attend the conference will have an opportunity to go over there and talk with some of the community members. There's an art gallery there with photographs and historical information about the incident. Very educational.
Thank you. And the two new board members, or is there gonna be a press release on that?
There'll probably be a release from NACO about the newly appointed board members, so I don't want to jump the gun on that.
Okay.
That information comes from the president.
Thank you, Jason. And Mr. Brown, do you have any other things that you want to share from the city manager's office or anything you want to share?
First, I'd like to just say that I'm really grateful for the collaboration on like the street event here with ODPA. And I'll echo your feedback on that as well. And coming up from our Reimagining Public Safety partners is the launch meeting for Community Violence Intervention Collaborative with Community Partners. That will be tomorrow, Thursday, 4:30 to 6 p.m. And everyone is encouraged to join. I will be there, and I look forward to seeing you all there as well. And I'll also be at the Housing Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow to talk about our intersection on housing, Berkeley equity inclusion, which really undergirds one of our main social determinants of health in the city of Berkeley. So looking forward to both those events, and I'll see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all we have for right now. We're happy to take any questions for the board.
Any questions?
Yes. Yeah, I have a question. I know later tonight we're going to be talking about the methodology that the board's going to use regarding the controlled equipment report in the department. And I'm wondering if you could just remind me whether or not the board has other obligations related to military equipment. I'm kind of forgetting, it seemed to me that there was like a corollary report, either that the department issues pursuant to state law, or something that we then will review. And I'm asking because a member of the public had raised some concerns about one of the items that's one of the pieces of equipment, the 50 caliber rifle. And I know we're not going to be discussing the types of equipment tonight, but are there opportunities for us to do that later?
Yes, and this is where it does get, I think, confusing for maybe even the whole community. So there are two reports that you noted. There's the military equipment report, and then there's the report that was submitted to our office. So one is charter, one is through ordinance, the other one is through state law. They are very similar in nature. The other one comes down the line usually around the summer. That historically has been provided to us. That by ordinance doesn't have the same requirements of going to the board before it goes to council. But the practice of the department has been to submit it to the board for review on its way to council. So that was not ready yet, but there is overlap in what they report. The chief has indicated that there's interest in potentially to ensure that there's no confusion, and because they're very duplicative, to merge them and or allow one to sort of satisfy both of them. So like, I believe, and I want to get ahead, but that potentially down the line. For now, we have these two reports. The military equipment one is not ready yet, but it does, the one that we currently receive on the agenda does cover some of the same material.
Okay, and then when it comes time for the second report, would there be an opportunity for the public of our board to weigh in about particular items of equipment?
I think that the implicitly, the chief has invited that feedback, that's why she presents it to the board. Historically, I don't know if there's been any commentary that the board has made because it's not mandatory to say. And the one thing that we have noted is that the state law and even the Berkeley policy requires a community session. And that has what seems to be missing here. Other jurisdictions have a specialized meeting where they discuss that with the public. We don't really have that other than it comes to the board, and then they submit it to council, but there's no specialized session.
That's the state law requirement, that there be a community meeting?
Yes, and that's also included in their corresponding policy.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like there could be an opportunity, maybe we could do one formal, make it more clear to the public that that's the opportunity for input.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Director, I have a follow-up question on that. Is there, do we have a deadline or something in terms of when we get the controller equipment report to council? And is there a reason why we can't receive these two reports at the same time? Because I'm also concerned about AB 481, which is the state law. And the state law does require community notice, discussion, whatever. And so I assume that it coming to us fulfills that requirement, but it would be really helpful if we could get them at the same time, because there is some overlap, they need to be consistent. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that the ordinance talks about controlled equipment. The state law is about military equipment, and they're not necessarily exactly the same thing, like there's a definition of what is military equipment. But that's included in the ordinance report that we have tonight. So it would be really helpful if we could not see one and then some months later see the other. Yeah, and I think it's I think that it is a requirement of 481, of AB 481, that it be presented to the public, i.e. here. So, but maybe the council doesn't need our feedback, but it needs to be brought here.
Right, and so a few things, so the controlled equipment under the ordinance does require that the report be provided no later than March 15th of the year. So very specific on the date.
Provided to us,
Yes, yes, the controlled equipment, and then within 60 days of receiving it, the PAB has to agendize. So that's what the process we're going through, the chief is ahead of the March 15th deadline, and then we're ahead of within the 60 days. So we're going through that process. And correct me if I'm wrong, policy analyst in BPD, there isn't the same requirement in terms of timing for the military equipment, which is potentially why we receive it. I do agree with you. Not everything, they're not fully the same, but there's a lot of them. So I think that's why it's even in the contemplation of having a unified report. Yeah, and sorry, I don't know if I addressed everything, but I just
I was
wanted to.
just wondering if there's some reason why we can't discuss them at the same time.
Well, for one, the military is not ready yet, from my understanding, because they provided to usually once when it's ready, and it historically has been around the summer months that it's ready. To the point though about the community meeting, I think that is one interpretation, that because it was submitted to the board, and there was some community engagement. Other jurisdictions, though, even ones with or without civilian oversight, they have at least a specialized meeting where that is the only agenda item, so we haven't had that here yet.
Okay.
I'm gonna recommend that we carry forward this discussion into the agenda item. Is that all right?
Yeah, I was just asking because I was looking at the chief's report and I wasn't sure if I should be asking a question there.
Okay. No more questions for the director? Okay, thanks Rex for being here, sitting in the office, appreciate you. For presenting as well. Okay, next item. Chair and board member reports, oh, that's me. I have maybe one report, one is that, we've connected with, the director and I have connected with, a cohort of Berkeley law students who are willing to lend their efforts to our, policy work, whereas previously they were participating in, accessing different complaints and types of legal representation. And so they're really interested in assisting us with their policy work and, allowing us to oversee, you know, their research, I think would benefit us because, you know, we can always use more researchers on the type of work that we're, you know, involved in, especially because it'll allow us to branch out into other areas as well. So we might agendize that in a future meeting, but I just wanted to flag that for different board members. And if you're interested, if board members are interested in working with these students on a particular policy, you should let other board members know, make sure I know, so that we can coordinate that with the policy committee. That's my report. Are there any other reports from board members?
Yeah, one brief report. I just wanted to let folks know that I am working with policy analyst or NEO on policy complaint 2025-0001 regards interactions of members of the public with officers against whom the members have filed a complaint. And so we are working on a policy review of that. It seems that there are probably two pertinent policies to review, and we're looking at what other jurisdictions do and or whether Berkeley can be a leader in this respect. Yeah.
Welcome, Vice Chair Olson. What the record reflects. Okay, great. Vice Chair looking there. Any other board member reports? Okay, moving on. Item 7, Chief of Police report. I think Deputy Chief Davis here.
Good evening, everyone. Having a little issue here with my camera. All right, there we go. Happy to share the chief's update with you tonight. Start out with a few cases of interest. There was an armed robbery on the 21st of February at about 3:25 in the afternoon. There was a individual delivering packages in the 2000 block of Delaware Street. A suspect got out of a passenger seat of a car and confronted the victim as he was getting back into his vehicle. The suspect brandished a firearm, and the victim, a Portuguese speaker, did not understand what the subject was saying to him during the crime. However, based on the encounter, he was fearful of the suspect. The suspect ended up yanking off his necklace, took his watch and cell phone, and got back into the suspect vehicle, which fled. The vehicle gave chase. They both ended up stopping. The suspect chased him up a driveway on Milvia Street, and then soon the suspect got back into his vehicle and took off. We ended up alerting neighboring jurisdictions of the want for the suspect vehicle. And it's interesting, the Oakland PD and the Sheriff's Department had a fixed wing aircraft up, and they located the vehicle in the 3000 block of Broadway in Oakland. Both suspects were seen getting out of the car and were detained by ground units. And the victim later positively identified the suspect who confronted him. And there was a 9mm handgun that was found in the suspect vehicle. Both suspects, the driver and the individual who confronted the victim, were booked into the Berkeley City Jail without any issue after that. On the 26th at about 12:36 in the afternoon, our officers responded to the 2400 block of Carlton Street regarding an in-progress burglary. The victim had reported seeing a man on her roof through the kitchen window, and when the suspect approached the open window, the victim tried to close it. He ended up pushing her hands away, which made her fall. And the suspect was able to gain access to the residence through the open kitchen window, attempted to open several bedroom doors, and forcibly broke through a locked door where he ended up assaulting and tried to sexually assault another resident who was inside. Our officers arrived on scene quick, took him into custody, and he was arrested for burglary, battery, assault with intent to commit rape, and false imprisonment. On the 26th, we had a call with a man with a gun at about 6:43 in the evening. And the victim had called and said that a suspect lives in a tent at the dead end of Carlton. And apparently he had pointed a sawed-off shotgun at he and his son. As our officers were making a plan to go arrest the suspect, who they thought was at Carlton and 7th, I guess he happened to walk around the corner into the officers. They ended up taking him into custody and found that he had a loaded sawed-off shotgun concealed in his waistband. They ended up doing a probation search of his tent, and they found 2 stolen motorcycles, and they ended up towing, I think, 5 motorcycles and a vehicle from that encampment. Quick update on staffing. We have 2 academy recruits that started the Sheriff's Department Academy on March 3rd. So that gives us 6 police officer recruits in the academy right now. Chief Lewis offered 2 conditional offers last week to 2 additional entry-level candidates, and we're just waiting on their medical and psych exams to come back before we can get them in the hiring process. We have 7 police officer recruits and 2 lateral academy graduates in backgrounds. And then we have a virtual career fair, which was held today, where we had 154 people who responded to attend. Our dispatchers, we have 2 that started with us on March 3rd and another 5 in backgrounds. And we did have a dispatch seminar last night where we received about 295 folks who were interested, who wanted to attend, and about 75 people ended up showing up. Our community service officers, we have 6 in backgrounds. Parking enforcement, we have interviews at the end of the month. So that's it on the staffing side of things. One other thing I'd like to acknowledge that Chief Lewis and I have received a letter and memorandum submitted regarding the vehicle pursuit policy. I just want to say that I certainly appreciate the 9 months of collaboration and hard work that went into getting it where it is. So we'll be preparing a companion memo that we'll share as soon as it's complete. And that is all I have this evening.
Questions? Will you take some questions that you should?
I will do my best.
Great, good to hear.
Hi, Deputy Chief. I was wondering if you could enlighten us on any updates on the ALPR system, efficacy of it, maybe how many hits we've been getting on a daily basis, and how effective it's been from your purview.
I can say I think it has been very effective. I would have to get you the numbers. That's not something I have off the top of my head. I was going to see if I have any notes here for that, but I don't. I know that of the ones that are up, of course, we don't have them on San Pablo or Ashby yet, but from the ones that are up, we are getting daily hits, and we've had some good case closures as a result.
Other questions?
Deputy Chief, good to see you. I thought that I saw it and it was down today, but did you put some of the trends, the ALPR trends in the transparency hub? Or was that just a pilot that we saw? Do you know if that data is being included up there, or?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the location of where.
The ALPR data in the transparency hub, is that something that has been done, or we thought that we saw it, try to go on the hook there, but it was down a time, or we don't know if that was a permanent thing, or if you could speak to that.
That is a great question. I know that it's something that we have talked about. I'm not sure whether or not it is up yet.
Okay.
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, I don't see it easily accessible here, but I can certainly get some more info on the ALPR status and get back to you guys on that.
Thank you.
I just have one question about the background process for incoming officers. Just I wonder if you can speak a little bit about that. What is it, how long that takes, what is entailed beyond a normal background check that a regular civilian would have to endure for their, everyday job? Is there an additional background check that the department does besides, that's different from other city employees?
Sure. So generally it starts out with, they go through, we have a pre-investigative questionnaire, as well as a personal history statement. And those have a litany of questions that individuals answer. From there, our applicants sign a waiver that give us access to any of the law enforcement agencies that they have applied to. We reach out to every other agency and determine where they were in the hiring process there, or whether or not they made it through a background investigation that was potentially where they might have been disqualified. And we actually send officers and go and review those agencies' background investigations. We interview family and friends and as well as coworkers, and we ask for references from every single person that we talk to. So we try to go a little deeper than just the individuals who the applicant has put out there. And then also we go and we do a neighborhood check. So we go and we talk to folks who live next door to them, and we will also talk to roommates. So we're looking for anything that might give us concern. Additionally, once we go through all of the interview processes and looking for all of the dimensions, if there's nothing that is disqualifying from that point, then we'll have the individual come in and go through. They also do a voice stress test. And then once they get their conditional offer, then there's also the psych and medical that they have to go through.
Great, that's very helpful for us to know. Are there any social media scans that the department does before they hire an employee? I know that other private companies do a lot of social media scans. So just curious about the practice there.
We do. So it is challenging when you have individuals who have private accounts or whatnot, but we absolutely do a thorough search on any open sources in social media that we can.
Thanks for answering all of our questions.
You're welcome.
That turns to the next item. Thanks, Secretary Tate. Number 8, subcommittee reports.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As always, I'll go down the list of subcommittees and the subcommittees before we go. I will start with the regulation subcommittee.
We have another meeting this Friday. This time it's with the all of the city stakeholders and the union negotiator. As you might remember, we have a lot of meetings because we alternate meetings between the city stakeholders amongst ourselves, and then we'll have a meeting with the union negotiator. And so it's slow going, but that's the way it's done. And we have meetings probably 1 or 2 a week, every other week, seems like. Anything from you? Yeah, there we are. I understand that our labor negotiator will possibly be coming to a meeting in the near future to give a more detailed update on the process. That's it.
Thank you. Fair and impartial completing of implementation. I know there's also an item 10.
Yeah, I think we can give our update during the item.
Okay. Surveillance technology policy. No updates, one of the subcommittees we definitely have a vacancy for. Policy and practices related to the downtown task force and bike unit allegations.
Yes, we already talked about it on the agenda now.
Perfect. Policy review subcommittee,
No update.
okay. Tricks and operations,
No update other than our incoming, PAB number, but we'll be working on those issues with me. So we'll be ready to go when he's officially started.
okay. Outreach engagements currently vacant. And then, police department policy 1030 board review. I know there's a vacancy there as well.
Right, no further updates at the moment.
And then for liaisons or policy review assignees, are there any updates at this time?
I don't have updates on yet unless some board members have questions about it. But the implementation is underway at Fed will be.
Okay. So that, I don't believe there are any additional updates at this time. Sure. Karen, back to you.
All right, item 9A1. AI, no I. Discussion and action on the PAB's review of the BPD's mutual aid agreements with other law enforcement agencies. Status update. Director.
Sure, and just a real time update, I did find the link, I knew I wasn't mistaken, but and I'll share it and put in the minutes. There is a section in the Transparency Hub that does have some of the data regarding the AOPR data, so I'll just make sure that that's included in the record. I'll yield to our policy analyst for the discussion and what we did, and then I'll add anything.
Yes, this item is a follow-up to the previous discussion that the board had. There's a particular request for us to, one, review the process for the MOU approval. We did the research on it, and in the attached memo for members of the public, the page numbers on page 37 of the agenda packet. We provided a summary of what the process looks like and what the certain government codes are in terms of the standards and requirements for each individual MOU. Regarding the MOUs that we were asked to retrieve, the compendium of MOUs that currently accessible does have 3 agreements related to immigration employment matters, which was a request from us at the last meeting. The packet itself didn't contain the full MOUs, just the summaries that are included in the packet from page 39 to 41. But we are working and getting the full agreements on those. But just wanted you to provide an update on that as to the previous status and discussion. Director, I hand it back for any comments on the subject.
Yeah, just to be clear, you have already satisfied your initial requirement of agendizing this. You also changed the language to review it as a board, and this was the request that the board had the last time we had this discussion. So that's what this is right now. We're happy to field any questions or provide any other information.
Questions, yes.
Question, yeah. So just looking at your memo, and I was wondering about the process for renewal. And it says that agreements remain valid for 1 year, must go to the city public review the approval process for renewal. So every year, every mutual aid agreement is reviewed and or not.
That's what the code says. I can't confirm as to whether that's the practice. I know some of these agreements for our review were longer than others, as approved by council, so. But the code on the relevant Berkeley municipal code sections from, and it's under 2.04 to 150 to 2.04 to 10, says that there's the 1 year renewal that they have to be renewed.
It looks from these that they're very old, right? The last approval is 2017. So you did not at least for these that you, excerpted here for us, they have not satisfied that linear policy, is that correct?
We're following up with the department. We have asked if that is an active list, the 2018 list. That's what we have right now. We have not gotten confirmation whether there's a more updated one. So we are working with the chief and deputy on that.
Board Member Calavera?
Well, that was my question. It says the current approval is 2017, so it just occurred to me that this hasn't been done annually unless there's something more up to date. And I was also wondering if we were going to talk about the content of these things at all, or what is being agendized to notify us that this is what they look like, or are we going to discuss the content?
So I would like to discuss the content,
I would too.
but we don't have the full agreements in here. So
Shall
we
we
can,
wait?
if we have substantive comments, we should make them now, like within the next 10 minutes, and then we can, have a fuller discussion when we have the full ones. So,
Well, at minimum, we need to know if there is a requirement that they be reviewed in the order, and if that's that. And
Yeah.
we need to find that out.
yeah,
So, yeah,
go ahead, please.
well, I have a couple of things. The first is on page 39, where it's the summary. And it says the police department occasionally requests the assistance of USCIS to locate non-citizen persons, who, et cetera, et cetera. It just occurs to me that the way this reads is that it's tantamount to alerting ICE that we have such individuals and that they are suspected of crimes. That's number one. Number two, I had some concerns on page 41. It talks about the resolution prohibiting the use of city resources in support of immigration investigations. And then in the next paragraph, it talks about our department providing professional courtesy standby security service. That sounds like using resources. So that seems to be contradictory, and I would like some explanation of that from somebody.
Yeah, I have the same question, so I'm gonna ask our department rep here, Lieutenant Bonaventure, if you could shed some light on those two provisions that Board Member Calavita pointed out, and if you are aware of any professional courtesy that the department has shown to ICE within the last 10-15 years.
No, I've worked here for over 15 years, and I've never worked with ICE policies. We don't work with ICE for any type of immigration enforcement.
So so when you say for any immigration enforcement, the policy on 39 seems to, I guess, like encompass criminal enforcement of criminal laws with respect to undocumented citizens. So if there was that investigation, would the department then coordinate with USCIS? So if it wasn't for immigration purpose, but it was for a criminal purpose, would the department then coordinate with those officials?
If it's just for a law enforcement purpose.
Yeah, for a law enforcement.
Nothing, I don't recall us working with them in that capacity, but I can't say for sure.
Okay. I think we have questions about that, so maybe at the next meeting, we'll talk about this again. And those two provisions also stuck out to me, so definitely would like to hear more about that. And also, we would love to see the full memorandum at some point.
Okay.
So maybe put those on your next, that'd be great. Thank you for answering my questions on that, appreciate it. Are there any other comments, board members on these particular?
Well, it's just that on that same page 41, it talks about Chief Hamilton codified these directives in 2008.
Right.
That may even be before Berkeley was declared a sanctuary city. I don't know. But it just seems like maybe this ought to be reviewed annually, at least this year.
I 100% agree with that. So are there any actions that we need to take based on this discussion?
Not at this time.
I guess I'll best in board members, sorry, oh, sorry.
We weren't seated.
Well, I think, related to, board member Leftwich's comment, a clarification of the 1-year renewal and what the exact status is of these agreements. That's a direction to staff or request to staff. I don't know that we need to vote on it. But I just had a different question. I don't remember, and this could very well be me, that we limited our review of these agreements to those related to immigration. That was a decision that we made.
We
No.
have,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry, I didn't know that was a percent. That was the specific request out of that last meeting to kind of start from here. Those were the ones that, to my recollection, there was no limit to only these ones.
Okay, because I vaguely remember thought we were gonna look at a list of all of them and looking for recommendations about how to prioritize, but I may have made that up.
We did that already. We had the conversation where they gave us a list and we had a conversation about prioritizing. And this is what came out of that.
So this is it.
No, it's one of,
Just the first. So what are the other?
the other ones that we discussed were the, ones with, the university, the mutual aid agreements with the university.
Okay.
Those are the two, ones that board members expressed interest in. But if there's more, we should bring them up for sure.
No, I thank you for remembering. So maybe next time, this comes back to us, if staff, you could just include those two categories in the memo, for those of us that can't remember.
Yeah, and we don't wanna, also, we wanna cause greater confusion because we don't even know if this is the active list, so that's why we're following up with the department, make sure we're, even before we continue our conversation, we have the current list.
You've been asking for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah,
And only the department would have them, not the clerk's office or the city manager's office?
well, they should be made public, but the only publicly available one is the 2018 list that we have. So if there's another list that for whatever reason is not a public record, we just wanna make sure that we're identified.
Okay, I'm just suggesting maybe you can ask the city manager's office or the city clerk's office also.
Okay.
Sure. Can I get some more clarification on how long you've been asking for these?
It's been a few meetings, we need to look at the record.
Has it been more than this year? Were you asking last year as well?
I believe so.
Yeah, I believe when we started the conversation last year, but I think last year we got this list. So we followed up again to make sure that this was the list that's still active.
We got this list from the department when you presented to us, right?
Yes.
When was that?
Last year, so we got that list, the 2018 list last year, so we followed up when we initiated this conversation. It's just the current list, and we haven't gotten a direct response.
Okay. Well, I'll bring that up. On my own. Unless the board wants to vote on me bringing it up, but I think it's important that we get this. Okay. Any other substantive comments?
I just kind of related to that, I was thinking it might be helpful if staff has kind of an ongoing list of requests. Just so it's easy to keep track of what requests you've been made, and maybe that can be part of the materials that you provide updates to us on. Requests that you still have not received response, outstanding requests. And that we could have asked Deputy Chief Tate also about that, so that would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe in the net whole agenda is this item for the next meeting, and for the cover page, could you include what Vice Chair Wilson was discussing about the different memorandums that we want to review? And then also a table with the dates that we've reached out for the specific items.
Okay.
With, the request and the date next to it, so that the public and us can know. Great. Okay. This was productive. Thank you. Moving on to the next item. And I'm not seeing it here, sorry. 9C, because Vice Chair Wilson, we skipped, we're moving 9B to the next meeting, when we have more board members here.
Okay.
So 9C, discussion action on resolution recognizing the following former board members for their service and contributions to the PAB: Michael Chang, Nathan Mazel, Izzy Ramsey, Deborah Levine, and Carol Owens. Director?
Yes, and this is just a continuation of the recognition that we have been providing to the former board members. We did reach out to them just to notify them of this recognition. Once the board formally approves them, then they will go to council. Just want to make a note that this board has historically seen a lot of community members have been very devoted and it's a rich tradition that this community has, and all the board members listed there, the former board members who made significant contributions as noted in the resolutions. So wanted to make sure we're recognizing the hard work.
Any personal board member reflections on these board members that they want to share publicly right now? Besides what's in the package. I know that some members here had personal interactions and experience with the 5 members here. Just wanted to give an opportunity. All of these members predated me, so. If not, are there any comments on the particular? Oh, yeah.
I believe you might have another public, I don't know.
Are we allowed to?
There is an opportunity for you.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're following protocol. What is the?
If there, you could present a motion to allow for public comment, correct?
Okay. I'll move for people to give public comment on one of these, C 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just as a courtesy to these board members.
Are there any objections to the motion? Okay.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to comment on having worked with Izzy Ramsey and his being having a particularly valuable approach in terms of both leadership and in terms of working on, what really is the best way. This was particularly about the use of force policy and some of the other insignificant policy reviews that I was able to witness, basically, or serve as a public member on those things. And he just did an amazing job in terms of getting consensus and working with the department on what was really the best wording and so forth. So, thank you.
Okay. I'll move on to our virtual attendees. As a reminder, this is for public comment for item 9C. Again, this is limited to item 9C. Okay, I see one hand raised. George Lippman, you have been granted permission to speak.
Hi, sorry, I had my hand up from the previous item. So I don't know, is there an opportunity to comment on that?
We'll take comments on previous items at the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
I move that we adopt the resolution recognizing the former board members' contributions.
I second.
That's close one. We'll give it to Boardroom Bloom this one. Okay, so on the motion to approve the resolutions recognizing the following board members noted in item 9C through 9CI through 9CB. Motion by Board Member Leffler, seconded by Board Member Williams. Do we have any objections to that motion? Seeing and hearing none. Motion carries.
Okay. And just acknowledging that we do have public comment available on item 8 or 10, sorry, at the end of the meeting for anyone who wants to comment on other items on our agenda. Okay, moving forward to 9D, discussion action on the resolution calling for the designation of April 17 as Police Accountability Day. Director?
Yes, similar nature, Chair, we're trying to raise awareness of the hard work that's been done again The city of Berkeley has been on the forefront of police accountability, believed to be the first civilian oversight agency with investigative authority. We're just celebrated our 50th a few years ago, so we just want to make sure we're recognizing that rich tradition and also raising awareness in the community and within the city infrastructure about the work that we do here and how we're trying to promote better public police relations through the work that we're doing here. So it seemed fitting to ask council to formally recognize April 17th as Police Accountability Day, which is the date where the original PRC ordinance was passed. So.
Yeah.
Is this something that the council does regularly, accepts this type of request?
They do, not from us, but they do from other entities do receive these kind of resolutions and requests.
Any questions? Comments?
I don't want to be like a name here, I guess I don't know exactly what the point is, I'm not sure. Yeah, so I'm not sure what this is gonna result in. When we say bring more visibility, like what do we anticipate that means?
Is that question for staff or?
Yes.
I don't, whoever brought this forward, like what is the idea behind what the impact would be, or is it in conjunction with some kind of planned communication or outreach strategy?
Yes, definitely the latter, but my personal philosophy, I think it is important to historicize and document the importance of these institutions. We have a 50-year tradition here. We have been formally recognized by NAPOL at the 50th anniversary. I think it is a way for the community and the council to demonstrate the commitment to police accountability here. Yes, in many regards, it is a symbolic gesture, but it's an opportunity for us to continue community engagement and something we can rally around every April 17th and to memorialize that day.
Any other comments?
I think it's a good idea. It'll be read in front of, it would be read at the council meeting. I mean, it's one way to do outreach, I would say, or let the public know that we are here. It's April 17th, 1973, I think was the year it was first established.
Any comments? No? I guess I'll ask for a motion.
I move we accept the proposal.
I second it.
We prefer roll call vote?
Yeah, let's do it.
Chaired by, or sorry, I'll start with my usual order, I'm going to be Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Lethbridge,
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Kayatani.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving to the next item. 9E, discussion action on the Berkeley Police Department's 2024 Police Equipment and Community Safety Report pursuant to Chapter 2.100.050 of the Berkeley Municipal Code. And I'm going to, actually, before kicking it off to the director, since we've already discussed this, remind board members and inform board members who were here last year that we did discuss this last year, and I brought up that the municipal code 2.100.040, which I'm gonna ask the director to pull up on the screen, if possible, which is hyperlinked in the agenda actually, contains different factors and requirements for the board to consider. And you know, my position last year, and it's the same position this year, is that the current data that we get from the department to understand and, read the report, doesn't actually, give us enough information to evaluate based on these factors. And, I had a discussion with, Arlo, who is in the Office of Strategic Planning and Accountability. I forget what the name of his department is. And he said that they're committed to providing us information, as best as they can, that we need to evaluate based on these factors. So I just wanted the board members to be aware, that this report doesn't have every single, detail that we would need to perform a full review, but, it requires building up the data infrastructure before we do. I don't know if the director, if my spiel gave the director enough time to pull up that list.
Working on it.
Okay. I just want to give that background, because I did have a conversation with the department about, getting the information that we need to perform our mandated duties. So while we pull that up, please, other.
Well, but tonight we're talking about our methodology, right? Because
Which is part of this, yeah.
we could either do a very deep dive, superficial review, and I think in the past, it's been very superficial. Because as you said, we did not have enough information. We also don't have the resources to do a real deep dive on the single ones.
Yeah, so maybe I'll give the director a chance to explain the three options that he presented. And then we can comment on whether we want to do this fulsome review based on these factors. I think it's scroll down more. Anyway, yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
And to be clear, under the memo, we just brought up the last recommendation on potential methodologies. So the numbers that you see there, they don't necessarily correlate with this 2024 report. That was for the 2023. We had not had a chance to review it and provide any preliminary impressions, but we do believe that some sort of approach, as we outlined, can be a good way to get this. I think we have acknowledged that we're a little strapped with resources and personnel on the board and the staff. So it would seem like the latter option. I don't think a full review would be appropriate at this time, but potentially either the second or the third option, which is the full review of each incident where equipment was used. Last year was 12 cases. That can potentially be accomplishable, but it would depend what you're looking at, how much officers were there, how much body-worn camera footage. Then you could also do a purposive sample or a random sampling. But I think at least touching some of the material beyond the report would be helpful. If there is in the future more interest in doing a deeper dive, then that would be appropriate. But for the sake of this year where we are now, at least making a decision whether you want to go beyond the report would be helpful.
Let me just add one thing to that, because I think your recommendation only centers on the instances within the report that we would review. It doesn't cover, as I was discussing, the methodology that we would review it by. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I would ask the director to pull up 2.100.040 subsection C and zoom in there so that everyone can see it. And I'm going to read it so that we can have an informed discussion. Right? Okay, great. The Police Accountability Board shall recommend approval of a request to fund, acquire, or use controlled equipment pursuant to this chapter only if it determines all of the following. The controlled equipment is needed and there is no practically available alternative equipment which is not controlled equipment that is sufficient for the purposes. B, the proposed controlled equipment use policy will safeguard the public's welfare, safety, civil rights, and civil liberties. C, the controlled equipment will not be used based on race, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, political viewpoint, or disability, or disproportionately impact any community or group. If the subcommittee's controlled equipment impact report identifies a risk of potential adverse effects on the public's welfare, safety, civil rights, or civil liberties, the Police Accountability Board's recommendation for approval for the funding, acquisition, or use of the controlled equipment shall not be deemed an acquiescence to those efforts, but instead an acknowledgement of the risk of those effects and the need for the police department to take proactive steps to minimize those effects. So the methodology is, in my opinion, set forth at least somewhat in this municipal code.
But that's for the acquisition.
No, or use.
Or use.
It's also like, there's a separate subsection that refers to that.
Can I get into that question? I appreciate you reading that, but I'm a bit confused about the distinction between deployment and use. And, so in the staff report, it says on page 60, in item B, for the purposes of annual reports, use of equipment shall refer to equipment that is deployed.
Right.
And then we are using those terms interchangeably in the proposed approaches table, except for the middle box, which just refers to use. And then in the department's report, in one section, it looks like the terms are interchangeable, and in another, it is not.
Yeah, page 63, they define the deployment.
Okay, so there's a deployed, in other words, deployment refers to the visible display of equipment intended to prompt a public response. The equipment need not be actively used for the deployment to be reported. So there again, it looks like it's a distinction. And then it's the table on page 5 report, this report reflects both deployments and use. But then when you go to table 5, there is not a clear delineation between deployment and use.
I understand.
I think maybe it's 8, so it says, out of the 50 incidents in which military equipment was deployed, the top of page 65, 8 involved active use of equipment. So I think, are we taking from that, they are not one and the same, they're distinct. So I think as a threshold matter, what you read, Chair, looks like it's referring to particularly use versus deployment, which would be limited to 8 cases, if we're reading this correctly, which seems like we could do a 100% sample, if that's the correct. So I wanted to clarify that was.
That's the way I read it too, is there was a clear distinction between deployment and use. And 8 pieces. You leave that out.
Lieutenant, do you have any insight into the distinction between deployment and use when we're talking about control equipment? I think my memory is that deployment could be that they're carrying weapons, for example, but they're not using them. That would be deployment. Use is when they're actually using that piece of equipment. They want to make the distinction here in B that deployment doesn't just refer to putting a piece of equipment in a vehicle, for example. But there is a distinction between deployment and use. Use is the more active use of it. Deployment is, let's say, carrying it or, yeah. So
there is actually a definition in the municipal code that goes directly to what I read and probably to this report as well, since it says in D, which is what's referenced here on page 63. Says except as provided below, deployed means to utilize or employ controlled equipment for a deliberate purpose in the presence of members of the public during management or control of crowds during any special response team, or to effect some response from members of the public during any other operation or critical response. Deployed shall not mean an officer merely wearing a piece of controlled equipment on their belt or elsewhere on their person. what's interesting in this definition is that they're using the word deployed as it means used. And
And are they defining use? Because I remember, we've had this discussion. And there was a distinction, and I thought the distinction was that you might deploy do you remember pictures that one of the members of the public brought forward? It was during the,
yes, they were holding them in their car. And
yeah, and they were holding them in their band. They weren't using them, but they were deploying them for the
Purpose, intended for the purpose of public response.
right,
I think that is,
and that's deployment,
that's what it says on page 63 in the text,
right?
which they're citing that same provision.
Right.
So I think we just either have to ask the city attorney for an opinion, or we're making a decision. Because it doesn't impact this whole sampling question. The way the report is presented, deployment and use are distinguished. 50% of each. So,
No,
So would you rather come to our own opinion or ask the city attorney?
I don't think we need the city attorney. And why would we need the city attorney?
I mean, it's interpreted in Berkeley municipal code, but
yeah, I mean, I just think it's a different, one is, are we interested in reviewing deployments intended for the purpose of demonstrating whatever that is, right? If we're interested in that, we want to make sure that our authorized scope of review includes deployments. If we're only interested in use, then it's moot, it doesn't matter, right? So maybe that's the first question.
just want to make sure everyone's tracking what we're discussing. So in our methodology that's set forth in 0.040, it uses the word use. But the word use in 0.020 definitions is not defined. So there is an ambiguity that we do have to resolve. I personally would prefer that we have the authority, if we want, to review using the factors set forward in 0.040, all of the deployments that the department reports to us. It wouldn't make sense for the department to have to report all the deployments and for us to only be able to review a subset of those based on factors. The section in 0.040 says that we have to present, we have to analyze their report, and it wouldn't make sense for us to only be able to analyze a subsection of that report and be limited to that sample, based on definition that is non-municipal code. So I would prefer to adopt a fuller definition, and if someone wants to prevent us from doing that based on their interpretation of the municipal code, then we can ask them to file, to ask the city attorney for us.
oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about, you said 0.040, do you mean 0.05 now?
No, 40 is the methodology that I was reading,
Oh,
for that we are asked to evaluate this report under.
okay.
And there's different race, national origin, but there's also this language that there is no practically available alternative equipment, which is not controlled equipment that is sufficient for the purposes. And so that language to me reads that the department couldn't have used any other, less than basic means in that specific scenario. And I don't know how we're able to determine that unless we have the information for the specific instances that we're interested in.
But even if we do have that information, that I don't know if we have the resources, and I think we need to narrow our purview here, just because we don't have the time or ability to do a deep dive on every single.
Yeah, not every single, but if we wanted to decide it on 5 of them, for example, we would be able to. That's what I'm considering.
So maybe we can just come up with a proposal or a motion. So I see some options being a small random sample of deployments and a 100% sample of use cases, or a random sample of both deployments and use cases up to a maximum number of use. Right, so those are like 2 options that I see, since I agree, we would want to look at some deployment.
Let me propose another branch, I guess, is that I talked to the department and they basically said, they don't have the data right now gathered for us to evaluate as set forth in C1, A, B, and C. And they haven't provided that, and it would be very difficult for them to provide it. So one option is we do what we did last year, and we tell them that next year we will want to be able to put forward C1A, be able to do C1A, B, and C based on a specific subset.
You're saying we defer for the time.
Not deferred, set us up for success for next year because we didn't do it last year.
But I guess I'm not sure, why wouldn't we adopt a motion? Staff can make a request for the data formally, if we don't get it. And then we understand that we've done our understanding. Yeah.
That would make sense.
Sure not.
Just a clarification, I know it sounds doable superficially, but we don't know how many officers, how much hours about on camera footage. What exactly are we requesting? Because that may also.
Well, I think the chair is suggesting you go by the orders, right? Or the chart to tell you what you're requesting.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is in order for us to evaluate A, B, or C, we would need to ask for body worn camera
Right.
related to specific incidents that we identified from the report.
Which could be extremely time consuming. And what are our time constraints again? About
60 days.
Yeah, that's not much time.
We can still fulfill our duties.
Well,
So-
so maybe why don't we pick 4? 2 uses and 2 deployments, but I think we don't have to
Sure,
kind of spin on this too much. Maybe 4, 2, I would pick 4, staff can come back and say we're off the lot. Footage, I don't know.
any thoughts on that proposal?
I'd like to see us at least try,
Okay.
and that would have to get a better sense of what even encompasses going forward if we try it.
So if we're going to be focused on the use and a random sample of others, is that what we're talking about?
Maybe
We're
it
talking about,
can be random, you know, we can just see what which, you know, we can just pick, I guess.
I guess, you know, it'd be nice to have that thing in front of me that you read earlier in terms of what we're required to do. Is it only acquisition and use? I forget, can you just?
No, it says fund acquire or use, but the municipal, fund acquire or use control equipment pursuant to chapter, but the chapter doesn't define use,
Okay,
it defines deployment.
okay.
And so the conversation we were having is, does the fact that it says use limit us to the way that the
I
department is?
understand that.
Yeah.
But what about those items that are not being used? Do we have any say about whether we should retain those? In other words, there's some items on the list that are never used.
Well, that's what I was asking about earlier, and I thought I understood the director said there'll be another opportunity for us to raise that issue, because now if we're just looking at this report, we're not. The question isn't, should any of these pieces of equipment, or those that weren't even used or deployed, should they even be, should it be permissible?
Right.
So that's a completely different question.
And when do we address that question?
Well, I thought the director was saying there'll be an opportunity to do that in the summer, we'll get the second report, and then we can have the public.
For the 481.
Yeah, that's the military.
Exactly.
State one.
Right,
All right,
because there's the overlap, so.
so for now, do we have a motion on the floor?
We don't have a motion yet. I was asking for thoughts on Vice Chair Wilson's proposal to identify 6 of them. I guess she was saying, right? 6, you're saying 4 uses of 2 deployments.
Or, yeah, in part to see what it involves.
Right,
Okay, so are there 4 that stick out, or should we just randomize the throw some dice down?
I'm personally interested in the light sound distraction device, LRID, there's a number
Yes,
highlighted. Because some of this equipment. And I think we were given the presentation a long time ago
yes, we were.
on this, but it's been a while, and, it'd be nice to have more information from the department about some of these pieces of equipment. I think the list, I know they provided a list with a description.
Bit of mentor is the LRAD the same as the light sound distracted device or that?
So those are the
What's the LRAD again?
the LRAD, amplified. It's basically like it amplifies your voice at a very high rate. So you can be heard clearly, used in crowd control situations, and so forth.
Okay.
In pages 74 to 76 have a description of the different equipment. So, the LRAD is on page 76.
Right, but I could, the light sound distraction device, hard to visualize what that is.
Right.
Hard to understand what it is, and that came up on several of the instances. Right, so that's frequently used, so that should just be one of them that we picked. Okay,
And the LRAD,
yeah,
Yeah. So would that be number 7 for one?
yeah.
3 more?
I'm just gonna suggest if there are ones that are speaking to people, maybe just identify these that here, and otherwise we defer to staff to select the remainder of the sample. Yeah, I don't feel well positioned to weigh in on this.
I would just say, well, I'd be interested in the, with the LRAD and the light slash sound distraction device.
So 7 and 12.
or
Which
which
is several.
for several.
Oh, so all of them, so the 4, that would be the 4.
We don't need to do every single one of them, but.
I think it's a focus on one piece of equipment, so you can get statistically sounds.
There's seven of those.
Or at least as good as you can get.
If there's 7. You need to see that.
Yeah, no, almost, that's what it is.
Okay, let's focus on that.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay,
All right, we need a motion.
Yeah, we do. And let's make it to authorize the director to request these necessary records.
okay.
I would like someone else to. Make a motion.
I move that we ask the director to request the necessary records for these. Okay.
For the,
They do all of the,
for all the ones where they see that another.
Okay,
and the light slash sound distraction device, those are two.
yeah, 7, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, LRAD and light sound distraction devices.
I'll second that. That works for you, Leslie?
Yeah, so on the motion to ask the director, please ability to request the necessary records to review all incidents involving LRAD and mixed sound distraction devices, and on the motion by Board Member Calavita.
Yeah, and let's say pursuant to our authority under 2.100.040. On that motion.
Pursuant to our duty.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll say the-
I mean, we're required to do it.
so many times we're mentioned in municipal code, so.
And just for clarification, everything that's highlighted in yellow for devices that were actively used.
Yes.
That's why they're highlighted. Okay.
Okay, so do a roll call vote on this one. Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Lethbridge.
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Capano.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, moving on. Alright, let's start going. Moving on, let's see where we're at.
That.
Okay. recap, discussion, action on the next steps after PAB's presentation to the Public Safety Policy Committee. Starting with Berkeley Police Department tracking offenses and independent investigation by the Police Accountability Board. We'll give this off to Board Member Kelly.
So last Wednesday, a week ago yesterday, our report on the downtown task force and bike unit texting offenses was presented to the city council committee on public safety. And that's a 3-person committee consisting now of council members O'Keefe, Kesserwani, and Blackaby. Blackaby was voted as chair. And I did a presentation of the report that we all passed unanimously and with its recommendations. And I understood that I had about 10 minutes and I kept it brief at 10 minutes. With a few slides. And when I finished, there was a little bit of a silence and Chair Blackaby asked if there were any questions. Councilmember Kesserwani asked, I forgot to mention that Chair Cayetano and Vice Chair Wilson were attending remotely. And Director Aguilar was there with me in person. The room was small and it was filled with public, maybe 20 people, and then there were some also remotely. And the chief was on remotely. Councilmember Kesselwani asked the chief something, I forget what was asked, but in any case, the conversation was a little confusing because there was some confusion about the relationship between our recommendations and our report and the regulations that are currently being discussed, being negotiated. Our report, you may remember, was a policy and practices review subsequent to the downtown task force texting offenses. And it had nothing to do with the individual personnel complaint process that our regulations are being written about. So that was confusing. In any case, when the chief and Councilmember Kesserwani finished their discussion, pretty much the chair correct me if I'm wrong, somebody who was there, pretty much that was the end of the discussion. And my greatest disappointment, well, several, but one of them was that we were not asked a single question clarifying, questioning our recommendations. We were not questioned at all. There was no dialogue, no conversation about our recommendations. Furthermore, there was no nod even to the egregious text messages that had triggered this whole thing and the shock and hurt that those text messages produced in the community. One of my slides had those text messages up on the screen, so I would have expected that. In any case, there was a unanimous vote to send our report forward to council with a negative recommendations. And I was completely, frankly, flabbergasted. And in part because of the process, because not a single, there was no interest in understanding our recommendations, it seemed to me. That's the way it seemed to me. And that's all I'll say about that.
I'll make sure I'll send it further.
So we don't need to use it. No, I similarly was surprised by the lack of engagement.
Very disappointing to hear.
You know, one thing that could have happened, it could have, I want to say also that the vote was about to be taken, and it was obvious where it was going, and so I basically, because I was so surprised that there was no back and forth, no questions, I actually interjected. But I wanted to clear up the confusion that had been produced by this discussion of the regulations, because our report had nothing to do with the regulations that are currently being produced. So I wanted to clear that up, but, one of the ways that I think would have been better for the chair or for the process, and maybe we can learn from this for the future, is maybe in the future, we could request that each one of our recommendations be considered individually. Because it was easy to just dismiss the entire thing with a recommendation, a negative recommendation to council without considering individually these recommendations. So, anyway, that might be something to consider for us in the future.
That's a great idea.
Or when we present to request that that be done.
Yeah.
I was in attendance, and I thought that the report was very well done. We've already discussed and voted on it here last year, and it was very thorough. For Calvita, thank you for taking the lead on that, and how your presentation really addressed a lot of the questions that they had already that they asked eventually. And I too was kind of astonished that they wouldn't even recognize until prompted the egregious nature of the text messages and the substance of, and even like when that was an issue. And it took prompting from other community members that to sort of, you know, say like, and there is this missile too about, well, they said, well, we don't know if this, like, this is not like a systemic issue with the department.
Right.
And I think the part of your report was like, well, we never were able to know that.
Right, and furthermore, what I did point out, we have one of the points that was made, it wasn't a question to us because there were no questions to us, but one point that was made is that one of our recommendations that we have a policy prohibiting arrest quotas, since implicit arrest quotas is one of the things that seem to occur in the text messages. But one of the council members said, we do not have arrest quotas in this city, so why do we need a policy like this? So I tried to point out that policy making is about looking forward. You know, it's not about, it's not only about corrections of the past, but it's a forward-looking process. It just, the whole thing just seemed dismissive, and we, you know, I guess a learning experience for us.
Do you remember which council member made that comment about the arrest quota?
I don't remember. They all seem to agree that we don't need anything because, and there's also a sense of, oh, that was passed. You know, we don't need to do anything moving forward. Maybe I'm being unfair, but that was the sense I got.
Yeah, and I tried to raise my hand before they voted because it was clear to me where they were gonna vote, and they voted. I was remote, like I was there, I had to sit up. But since I was remote, I was just raising my virtual hand. And after they voted, I said to them, you know, I was really hoping to speak because you know, the world that we now live in, potentially, is a world where we can only rely on whistleblowers from within the department to raise this sort of conduct, which is what happened in the downtown task force. There was a whistleblower from within the department who sort of like exposed these text messages outside of any formal process.
After he was terminated, though.
After he was terminated, and what we wanted was to affirm the city council to affirm our ability to access these records because we had such a hard time accessing them throughout this process. And when I said that, there was actually Councilmember Blackley said, oh, actually, we're going to include in our resolution the ability of the board to access records, and which wasn't a part of, in my recollection, and I watched their exchange again, like, I didn't realize it.
This was informally with you after the fact.
No, it was after they had voted, but I had said, you know, I had objected and said, you know, the purpose of the PAB is to be able to initiate oversight.
Yeah.
And to actually oversee the department, and the Councilmember Blackley said, oh, we're actually going to include that in our resolution, even though it wasn't really part of the conversation prior. And so I'm really curious to see what the committee ends up including in the resolution, because if there is a commitment or an acknowledgement of our power to investigate, and
Maybe we should check in with them while there's still a chance to have some input about what this resolution is going to be, because this just happened.
yeah, I mean, it's videos published on YouTube, we can pull up the transcript and.
Oh, I didn't understand that he was that specific about what the resolution would, or did he say?
They weren't at first until I brought this up, and then he said, we're going to include a resolutions in the resolution, the ability of the PAB to access
Do
elections.
we know what else was going to be in the resolution?
Not word for, no, not word for,
They didn't vote on any particular resolution.
no.
They didn't vote on any particular, it's all, that part was.
It isn't clear, I don't know how the process works exactly. Do you have a comment, Director?
Just on the, I share a lot of the sentiments, I think one area that wasn't abundantly clear. In their discussion was this inclusion of informal quotas, so they were like, there were no quotas in the department. On a technical, formal level, there is no policy that says you gotta accomplish this. But in the plain reading of the text, which have been authenticated, will give in incentives for meeting these different milestones. So the fact that there was no recognition or concern about the informal aspect of the quota system, I think, it deserves more attention than what was given at that public safety meeting.
Yeah, how silly would it be if they could just say, we don't have quotas, we have milestones.
Right.
Like, you know, that doesn't make sense. We have like informal milestones, that doesn't make sense.
It's sorry, the milestones is my word.
I know.
But if they were saying, you know, if you do this, pizza, you get beer, like these are ways to incentivize people in a way that can be read as an informal quota system.
And there's an additional issue where members of the public, because there's not a formal policy, they can't make complaints that allow us to access.
I'm wondering if maybe we should pursue this discrete issue about quotas. Even though we kind of rejected it along with everything else. You know, maybe it's worth, you know, to follow on that particular case.
The thing is, because of the lack of interest in taking our recommendations, I perceived a lack of interest in taking the recommendations seriously. I sort of agree with you, Board Member Lefwich. But that would be sent to this committee.
Or
And,
maybe we could work with the department, maybe we could propose this to the department.
oh, good point.
Because if they would agree that
Yeah,
on a policy, then, you know, that would take
care of that.
Yeah.
And that is a good segue into our next discussion about that IP, but also just in general for recommendations. I think that there was room for us to work with the department before submitting recommendations.
Yeah,
And I think that from what I know, the department leadership doesn't approve of the text messages that were authenticated. And we could have put the question to them to identify, you know, individually the recommendations that they would support and submit, you know, more, you know, pointed letter to council based on that recommendation. But
Certainly maximize our chances of success. More collaboratively, or at least approach them specifically.
yeah, I mean, at least given the opportunity would be good.
Yeah, I would just say a week, we're gonna cycle into IP. I think what we've seen consistently is, we are not having the impact that we think is appropriate, given the responsibility that we have. And so I see there's kind of two different approaches to take. One, and I don't know if they're mutually exclusive, they're not. One is to be very collaborative, working with the department, come up with shared recommendations and move things forward in that manner. I think that's generally a good idea, and I do believe we should always give the department opportunity to weigh in before we finalize any recommendation of any import. But it does, it's not always going to be successful, right? And it's going to allow us to become co-opted at some point. So then the other approach, which I think we need significant investment in, is really engaging the community. And by that, I mean like the public writ large, because that the council will be responsible for. The voters, and as we've seen, as we've sat here in the meetings, generally, you know, not always, but very frequently, the same people that attend in person or remotely, our reach is narrow. And so I think we need to work on both fronts. So that's I feel like a broken record on a latter point. So happy to always try to come up with joint recommendations with the department, but that should not be our only strategy.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree too, and we have this outreach committee that that we're so overwhelmed with other work, we never get going.
I would also say that in the annual report, I would emphasize, we should emphasize that we don't feel like we're, given our obligations and our duties, that we don't feel like, we're given the respect that we deserve or the response. I just think that should be emphasized, and that we're disappointed given the amount of work that goes in, and this could be an example. Given the amount of work that goes into these reports, to be just dismissed, summarily dismissed, not appropriate.
I know we have a member of the public who wants to speak. I will say that we do have public comment and another item, and even if we did our public comment now, we wouldn't have a back and forth about this. So I would encourage any member of the public to speak, particularly these items, in maybe like 15 minutes when we have our discussion. And if you are interested to speak with board members on the side as well, and we can, integrate your comments. These two conversations are connected because the FIP, we had similar issues, but before we turn to that, we did have 12 members of the public come and speak in favor of the downtown task force report. I asked the director to create a list of everyone who had spoken in favor of it, and it still didn't matter. It was the most number of people that I've heard speak in favor of an item. And so, it's difficult, I would say. But with that, there's no action, right, that we need to take on this item? Okay. Let's go to 9F2, and then we can public comment after this conversation. Fair and impartial policing implementation report. I'll give it to Vice Chair Wilson.
Well, I think you should lead it. I gave a brief overview of the report, very much focused on the recommendations. At the public safety committee meeting, I then had to leave, and so the chair facilitated the subsequent conversation with the committee. And as I understand it, based on that and some additional conversations you have a recommendation for us. So I didn't get the opportunity to engage in any dialogue about the presentation. So go ahead.
We did present. The conversation went a little long, so we were a little time constrained on the back and forth. I think the high level takeaway is that our recommendations were a little confusing in terms of like what we wanted council to do. And so they recommended that we return to them with more, solidified and concrete solutions after consulting with the department. And so we did get questions on the FIP report, and I emphasized for the public and for the department that the council had directed implementation of, 14 different directives. And we're providing status report on that implementation. And we were identifying, along with the department, which items we thought were implemented, and which ones we thought were not. And so what I'm asking the board today to do is to identify from the FIP report 4 categories of items. One category is items that are complete that don't require any further reporting by the department, because one of the requirements from 2021 was that they provide quarterly updates, and many of their updates simply say implementation complete, which I think is, it's not really, if true, they don't need to be putting those 2 words into a report. And so we need to identify for the department and for the council which ones are complete. The second category is in recommendations where the implementation is complete, but we still want regular reporting. And so the reporting would be segregated by annual or categorized by annual, biannual, or quarterly. And we would recommend to council that we identify this as complete, but in order to accomplish the outcomes that council directed, for example, with reducing low-level traffic stops, low-level infraction traffic stops, we would want reporting biannually, for example, on specific metrics, and we would want to identify which ones for council and which ones for the department, because right now we're not on the same page about that. The third category is ones that are not complete, but we have the opportunity to engage in policy discussions with the department, and we will tell council that we will continue to have policy discussions, because some of the recommendations were policy recommendations that council didn't feel prepared to weigh in on. And so if we can identify specific policies that we will commit to engaging with the department on. And then the fourth category is ones that us and the department simply cannot agree on, and that we want council to weigh in on. And so I guess I feel like Vice Chair Wilson is really familiar with the recommendations, so I might turn back to her and to go through some of these, but I will say that tomorrow on my calendar is a meeting with the chief to discuss the board's recommendations from this meeting, to identify specifically which policies we can work on in order for both of our bodies to provide a report to the subcommittee before their next meeting in 2 weeks. And so I would like to be able to report some progress to the subcommittee, and I'm sure the chief would like to as well. So if we can dig into the recommendations and identify a couple that stand out to us, it would be great. You don't have to be thorough or complete, but we should at least give a good start.
I'm not sure, what do you want to do now? Because I did review, what you prepared, which is 2 and 3. You want to select a subset of these, or what do you?
So what I would do is I would recommend looking at the supplemental package and going through our recommendations to the Berkeley Police Department and identifying which ones implicate policies that we should discuss with the department and which ones we want regular reporting on.
And that's different from what is on pages 2 and 3.
That's my summation, my proposal, my first attempt at a draft, I would say. Page 2 and 3 is, I can talk through.
Yeah.
I can talk through a couple of them if you like.
No, I don't need to be talked through them. I guess what I would say is I'm fine with what we've done. I don't think that feel. My only addition, which is different from this, is not in the same thing, but I think it's important. Our report did include recommendations to the PAB and on page 28 of the report, and to my knowledge, we have not taken these up. So this is not for you to work out with the department, but I do feel like we need to do those things. So that's my addition to this conversation.
Yeah, you know, because of where.
Scenario-based training, so if the council referred to the PAB oversight of the implementation of the scenario-based training component. So what we said was this topic will be agendized for discussion at a future PAB meeting, including the appropriateness of and ability of the PAB to oversee departmental training altogether. And then the council referred to us, to the PAB, the acceleration of CIT activity. I don't have the broader context in my head here, but we said we'll take this up as a body. So those two are specific recommendations to the PAB that I think we need to act on.
And just to clarify, the council, can you like specify what the council recommended for the training?
The council specifically referred to the PAB oversight of the implementation of the scenario-based training component in the existing officer training required by the penal code.
Director, do you have any thoughts on?
I think we have, a good opportunity here now that we have acquired a scenario-based training system. It wasn't acquired for this particular purpose. But I think we can now work with the chief. I know the chief has, conversations with the UCPD, which also has a scenario-based training system, but they were positioned well to actually put this particular one executed in a way that makes sense. So.
Yeah, one thing I'm realizing is that I don't think that me, myself, starting with myself, but every board member, knows exactly every single, training that that an officer goes through. So I guess I would kick it back to Lieutenant Bonaventure and ask, does the department do scenario-based training?
Yes.
Do they do it only, like, at what points in the career of an officer do they do that?
Well, it starts with the academy, and then throughout our career, we have updated training, whether it's CIT training, whether it's training involved law enforcement action, stuff like that. So in the span of our career, we're going through training, we're going through training consistently. Where department is configured, we have training days dedicated every month. So weekday officers train when they want, and then weekday officers will train. So, and then it also depends on what type of ancillary duties the officers are part of. They have additional training.
And is the training conducted by post, or is it conducted by the department, or is there a regional office that leads those?
There are post trainings. There are people who get qualified, or the trainings get qualified through post.
Training.
Correct.
Okay.
And so some of those trainings are post certified and some are.
Some are not. So which ones, like, can you give me an example of one that you would do that's not certified?
I guess if we can maybe come up with some scenario-based training on tactics and so forth, that we're implementing, that didn't go through a post certification, but they're tactics that we use.
I think this would be, it's such an interesting and important topic, and you're right, I don't think we know much about it.
Yeah.
Perhaps we could have somebody from the department give us a brief, 20-minute, half-an-hour presentation on trainings. Maybe a list or a month or something if it's regular.
And would Sergeant Bradley be the point person, Lieutenant?
Yeah, so Sergeant Bradley would be okay.
The reason I was asking about the post is because, one of the council's directive thing is to ask us what is feasible, and I don't think it's feasible for us to get certified at post necessarily. So I wanted to make sure that every training that we do is not certified by post. Because that would be a big lift for us to propose certification by the post. Okay, that's I think coming out of what you're saying is this, future agenda item on hearing.
Right.
Okay. All right, great. One recommendation in the proposal that I saw was this, make resources on the police civilian encounters publicly available, such as through Rahim.org. And the department in their response noted that Rahim.org was discredited. And it's not something that I was familiar with. And I'm just curious what the board member's take is on this particular item, because didn't work its way into my list, and I don't know where it. Yeah, page 28 of the supplemental, number 9. And so I think maybe Vice Chair Wilson, do you have any insight onto this item right here?
No, I know. My insight into the item is that they've never been in compliance. And I think we should prioritize what we're asking them to do. So it didn't concern me that it wasn't on your list. But I mean, you know, you've got all the details that we have and that I'm gonna remember at this time is in this table as an attachment. And that, you know, if we go back and look deep in the archives on all of the FIP recommendations, we'll find something on this one. But I don't remember off the top of my head what it was supposed to do.
Where are you looking?
I'm now looking at the attachment, but
No, but I was asking.
page 20.
Page 20 of the supplemental, number 9.
Yeah. This.
I guess what I really want to do is get the board's approval to present this draft to the department, or approval with, you know, changes. If there's any disagreement with my list there, numbers 2 and 3, page 2 and 3. I mean, like the things that I say we don't require regular reporting are distributed business cards. I don't know how to go. Like, implicit bias training, pending warrant searches of people. And it's not to say that we're not requiring them to do that, it's just that we don't require them to regularly report that they have implemented a policy that ends warrantless searches, because all they're saying is we've implemented that policy, we're not doing those anymore. Which is true, that's to my knowledge.
Well, within they do have the ability to do warrantless searches on subset of the population. They amended that policy, the council amended the policy, I think it's the probation, supervised, those on probation, felony probation or something like that.
Right, was it suspicionless in the felony circumstance? That might be a better,
But there is a limited subset that they can do it on. I personally feel like you should go ahead with this list because you're engaging in a dialogue. The goal is to come up with a set of mutual recommendations to present back to the public safety committee, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like we should empower you to work with the department to generate that, you know, understanding that you'll use good judgment. So if some additional items come on here, like I can look at this and see a few others. I think that might be fine. My main, you know, the focal point of the presentation, the part that I gave, and I see it reflected here, is that the council needs to focus on efficacy and impact. So I think policy is very important, but I also think it's important to see over time, are we actually making progress? And you have that here, this data reporting, but I'd say this is my personal priority. And I think you're gonna get a lot of pushback based on the current response, right? So that for me is the key place to focus, and I think you capture it well.
and do you think that the quarterly or why doesn't matter for tracking?
I don't think it should be quarterly, because we're such a small city that I'm gonna look at that much data. And I think you should be open to that in the conversation with the department. In terms of their capacity, I think it's even okay to get an annual, we can get it, it would be great.
Any other thoughts on this list? Any thoughts on policies that we need to discuss with the? One question that I had is who is going to take this traffic low level infraction policy? Let me just tee up the policy question. The policy question is, the policy doesn't define what is a low level infraction. Right, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, that's one of the
Yeah, and so I wouldn't want to assign it to the policy committee necessarily. So maybe this is an item that the Berkeley law students can initially You have a head start on.
Should
Well,
define,
why, aren't you gonna, you're gonna engage in a conversation with the department, so they may say, here's our definition, but we don't need to assign it out yet, right? Let's see.
Oh,
what happens.
you're right, you're jumping the gun.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe they'll come up with a definition. For reading one, okay, all right, any other thoughts? No, I'm asking motion to. Allow me to,
I think you should make the motion because I'm not clear on what it is.
what the motion would be?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I would move to ask the board to empower me to negotiate these FIP recommendations identified on 2 and 3, with the department, so that we can present a joint letter to council, before the subcommittee with said recommendations.
Okay, I second.
Could I ask one
Yeah,
thing? This would be a friendly amendment.
sure.
When you interact with the department, chief or whoever it is, enhanced implicit bias training, that's marked as complete.
Right,
I'd like to know what that is,
okay. Good to know.
because
We can
that's
ask.
an important piece, and, you know, it's one thing to have policies about things and so forth, but we need to know what the practice is. And the distribution of business cards, we would know that this is happening if we had access to body worn camera footage. You know, because every encounter was supposed to produce the exchange of a business card.
I don't think we've never seen.
I've never seen it.
We haven't seen it in the body work.
I've never seen it.
I think we noted that. I think it's, you know, what we outlined in the report about the implicit bias training is the department's response was it's embedded in, you know, all the training that they do. I think it's fine to ask the chair to discuss it. I do think it's important to prioritize.
Right, well, I would just prioritize asking about the implicit bias training.
Sure.
Find out what's going on there. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I would definitely take all of your thoughts and priorities and integrate them into the conversation. I think the end result though will be a joint letter. Which is a motion, right? A joint to empower me to negotiate a joint letter that will be submitted. And we don't have a meeting before that joint letter would need to be submitted, so. I just want to flag them. You know.
Okay,
But do you need to modify the motion?
No, the motion should be good stuff, right? Can you read back the motion?
So a motion to empower the chair, to negotiate with chief the FIP recommendations and authorize to draft a joint letter.
Submit a joint letter.
Submit a joint letter. And that was a motion by Chair Gaetano. And was that Vice Chair Wilson that seconded or?
Yes.
Okay. I'll proceed with the roll call vote. Board Member Calavita,
yes.
Board Member Lethbridge.
Yes.
Board Member Williams,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson.
Yes.
And Chair Gaetano.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great. Now we get to move to item 10, public comment. I know that we have people here who might want to comment, maybe, yes, please. And people attending virtually, you're also welcome to stay on and comment on what we discussed.
Okay. So 3 minute timer is on the screen.
And just fair warning, I was scolded to keep it to 3 minutes, so.
I gotta speak on this issue because I'm part of Berkeley Cop Watch and we put so much work and time into trying to understand what happened with this TextGate incident. It was a travesty. And I share the sentiment that it's deeply disappointing. I want to push back, I think, on the idea that the police department is internally committed to upholding standards that are higher than this, because holding high standards means being open to actual accountability from the public in the democratic process, and from day zero, the police department moved to stop that and protect their people, and actually so did the city manager and so did the city council. So when this surfaced in 2022 fall, yeah, that's what we saw. So be warned that I don't think that they're sufficiently interested in actually like stopping the quotas. And their root issue here was that BPD was and still is operating effectively a vice patrol that scoops up unhoused people for open container, use of drug paraphernalia, etc. Most of whom are people in this endless loop of getting arrested, getting put on probation, getting sent back onto the street, getting arrested again. So it's just this endless loop of people, most of whom are in poverty, one of two of whom are Black, according to statistics we have, and that is appalling. That's really appalling. Just in this, yeah, in this infinite loop, and a lot of those arrests never result in charges. It's just shuffling people between institutions. I think that was kind of what was at the core of the policing practices that Textgate was all about. There were these officers who viewed people as objects and pollution and blight, but the actual policing practices they were implementing go way deeper than that. And yeah, the police department isn't going to take care of that by themselves. So I don't know how we build power to try to actually hold this accountable. That's just ongoing. That's like the work of our lives, I think. But yeah, I don't think this is over, and I think this is going to happen again. And we just need to be way more aggressive with the city council and the police. And I know that you guys might not have the capacity to do that, but we are aggressive.
3 minutes on screen.
Nick Saganor, I just wanted to really thank the board for what they put into making these reports and doing these. I was at that meeting of the safety committee. It certainly gives the impression to members of the public that the report was received, it was, went through a couple of steps before it was referred to that committee. That committee meets very seldom. The committee had a meeting scheduled for the fall, that meeting was canceled. So there's just this delay feeling to it. And then for it to come and be received such a short time frame in terms of the attention given by the members of the committee, it was to be very disappointing. But I hope that that work will not only be picked up by other people, but that the Police Accountability Board will find ways to go back with various parts of it. For instance, the suggestion of taking a resolution on unfunded comments. I think one of the things that you can say cause, you can say enable that committee to reject the whole thing was that it was not a list of we want the council to do this and this and this. There were bigger pieces. The recommendations would involve more work before it would turn into specific actions. And that I don't know that it would make a difference, but it might make a difference if what was brought to them was more specific in do this and then do this, rather than asking them to put work into really thinking about where to go and what happened next. But that was very disappointing, but I certainly appreciate the work. And of course, I'm one of those, familiar faces that shows it frequently, but what the vice chair said was, small reach. I totally agree. I'm not I'm not very persuasive, and I really do hope that you find ways to publicize your work more and get more people involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no additional public comments from the president, I'll now move on to our virtual attendees. Now, two hands, George Lippman, you have been granted permission to speak.
Thank you. I've got a couple things to speak to, so I'll try to go quickly. On this item, about the texting scandal, I just, on a human level, it's just really distressing. And I understand and I feel the pain of the members of the board who put so much into this and we all have in the community. I, I, um, I hope you won't give up. Um, I hope you will, as other people said, press forward with it. I feel like it just demonstrates a lack of regard for the work of the commission of the board by many members of the council that continues. I think I would only say a couple of things. I hope that you can find other folks on the council who will be more appreciative and maybe take up the banner of supporting its commission on policing matters and to Vice Chair Wilson's thought about working with the community. There are people in the community that want to work with the board, and so let's connect on that. I want to also say on a different subject of the memorand the understandings, memorandums of understanding, so forth. As a PRC chair years ago and a member of the PRC from 2015 through 2018. This was one of the most important things that we worked on. And I want to call out, I haven't read the current documents from this year, but I want to bring a few things to your attention. One is with the Northern California Regional Intelligence Center. One is with UASI, Urban Area Security Agreements. And with ICE, those were the top of what we fought about really for the entirety of the 2010s, and we made some progress. We took some of the racial bias out of it and religious, but those things need to be looked at every year. And this point, I don't want to get all rhetorical, but it's clear that we have now a national government that is white nationalist, that is authoritarian, that wants to use the power of the military against its own citizens and residents. Um, it's like we have to look for every way that government is going to try to co-opt and bring us into an alliance with these repressive agencies. Um, it's like the difference you were talking about between deployment and use, right? Going back to that, not an exact analogy. But just being in those is like an element of deployment, and it's getting more and more dangerous and closer to actually being used by the state. I hope that helps. Thanks.
Thanks, George. And I gave you 10 seconds for being a former PRC chair. Thanks for coming. I'm just telling you, I got scolded last time, so. Okay, moving on.
So we have one additional speaker, Greta Lavender, you've been granted permission to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my name is Retta Lavender Hill, and I'm a senior at Berkeley High School. I'm currently a criminal justice intern for the League of Women Voters, and for the past school year, I've been attending these meetings and taking notes. And I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge the importance of this board and the power and influence it has on the policing policies and how unique it is to Berkeley that there is a way to change police policy from the outside. And tonight, I wanted to make a public comment to bring attention to some concerns that many Berkeley High students are having about the police officer that is assigned to be Berkeley High School's resource officer. The resource officer has been put in place to make the school a safe, fun, and secure learning environment. And the idea is to have an officer who knows the students better than a normal Berkeley police officer if a dangerous situation were to occur. Last year, our school resource officer was named Dozier, but he has since retired. And our new resource officer is named Lino Guananja. The student body's understanding is that he stays off campus when there are no concerns and acts as a public safety liaison between Berkeley police and the Berkeley High School administration. Just to clarify, he's a fully sworn officer and wears the uniform and gun and is able to make arrests. And over the last 3 weeks, he has arrested 3 students on campus. The latest one, which occurred yesterday on March 4th, and the student administration wasn't notified of the arrest. The administration was first made aware of the arrest when the student who was arrested called his parents from inside the police department, and then his parents called Berkeley High School administration. This is concerning because there seems to be a lack in the liaison duties that the resource officer has between police departments and the school administration. And the school has a legal responsibility to know where students are and are responsible for students during school hours and while the students are in school. And from what we know from another recent arrest is that Lino was asked by the school admin to wait until after school was over to make an arrest of a student, but instead he went through with it and caused disruption to class. And additionally has been frequently seen on campus when there doesn't appear to be a problem. And one of his responsibilities per the policy manual is to provide security to the school and student body, yet many students and even teachers are conveying a sense of unease. And I think it's important to acknowledge that if people have had past negative experiences with police officers and understand how it can hurt the safe and learning environment that the school resource officer is ultimately supposed to support. My understanding is that there was a district policy passed about 2 years ago that uses strong language that tries and limits when a student can be removed from campus because it acknowledges the serious emotional impact that police can have on students. And I'm wondering if this school district policy can also be reflected in Berkeley's policy 348.6 that is about school resource officers and having it be reviewed to clarify the responsibilities and if it can be reviewed to increase the sense of safety for students at Berkeley High. Thank you.
I would ask that, thank you for commenting and, am I allowed to say anything about that or no?
We should be engaged.
Okay, yes. Thank you for commenting, everyone who commented, and, we have one more, okay,
No, we know. Yeah, that was your last one.
great. Thank you all for commenting, and with that, I think that brings us to closed session.
That's correct. If you're attending virtually, they will take a webinar, audio and visual will be stopped. We'll be returning after the session.
Update for the director on ongoing cases, but we didn't reach the decision on it. With that, bring it to agenda item. 11, 13, adjourn, or, yeah, 13.
I move we adjourn.
That's it. Great.